Hello, dear viewers, and welcome to a new edition of Business Insider. Of course, our main topic will be the World Youth Economic Forum, that great forum gathering youth from all around the world that held its fourth edition under the theme Back Together, of course, following a year of hiatus due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The President not only attended the inauguration, but he has been attending every single day the major events of the World Youth Forum, the fourth edition that took place in the City of Peace, the city of Sharm el-Sheikh. In his inaugural speech, the President called on countries to work together to overcome the current crises for the sake of humanity and establish peace, considering that the sincerity of intentions is the only way to end conflicts and manage differences. President Sisi also stressed what he called the inevitability of dialogue and the importance of managing differences and forming a state of certainty and belief that Allah's wisdom and secret in this universe is difference without discrimination. During his inaugural speech, President Sisi had said that Egypt was able to overcome, to come with good health initiatives after implementing several health initiatives in 2018, and that saved the country during the COVID-19 pandemic when Egypt struck a balance between keeping the country open and the business ongoing while safeguarding, of course, the citizens' health at the same time. He also said, the President, that the economic reform program had an important role in absorbing the repercussions of the coronavirus pandemic. The economic reform program, the initiatives, the presidential initiatives, the Decent Life Initiative, the mega infrastructure projects, and everything done in the past years to improve education and health services, to alleviate poverty and to improve the economic growth numbers in the midst of Egypt's strategy and vision for sustainable development is our main topic here with you, dear viewers, and we have the pleasure to host Mrs. Sahar Damati, banking and economic expert. Thank you very much, Mrs. Sahar Damati, for joining us. It's a great pleasure to have you with us.
It's my pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, and thank you for braving the cold in such weather. It's very cold here. I'm sure the weather is great in Sharm el-Sheikh. Certainly the vibes of the World Youth Forum are great.
Definitely.
How do you see the WYF, the World Youth Forum, tackling these important, vital economic issues that we talked about at the onset of the program?
I think that the conference is, by all means, from a strategic, from a tactical level, is very, very important, having all the youth from all over the world, the speech of all the major presidents and representatives of different countries, Egypt being at the top of the conference, is all of these have very significant, important implications. Of course, the major issues that were tackled are the issues on the table, whether we're talking health-wise, COVID-19 and its implication economically. Hence, we're talking about the implication of COVID in terms of the economic activities, problems, expected economic problems in the future, and the repercussions on the different countries. In addition to this, the climate change is one of the major topics that has to be given substantial importance as per the World Bank, IMF, United Nations meetings before. So all of these issues are on the table and have been discussed during the conference.
Right. Now, the President mentioned something very key when he mentioned that the health initiatives we took here in Egypt, fighting, for instance, the virus C that was spread here in Egypt, and totally eradicating it helped Egyptians fight against COVID-19, right?
Yeah, of course. This was one of the first initiatives of the president. As a matter of fact, it never happened that. I mean, you had Egyptians who were having such a disease a while back, and I would say around 40% of the population, or 40% of the population were vaccinated against this. And that was the beginning of alleviating poverty and one side, and as a matter of fact, also curing such a significant disease which endured among the low-income brackets population for a very long time.
Right. Another important presidential initiative was the Decent Life Initiative. Now, how key was it to alleviating poverty and to improving the lives of those who were living under the poverty line, or who still are?
Actually, I think this is one of the best ever initiatives that were taken by the government, not only because of its magnitude, but primarily ensuring decent life for Egyptians who've been suffering from low housing, low income, no electricity, no sewerage. So to tackle 4,500 villages and try, as a matter of fact, 4,500 villages in terms of sewerage, electricity, water, and as well decent housing. So that was an incredible initiative. They finished approximately 1,000, and they are still remaining with 3,500 to be finalized by end of 3 years. So this is the best initiative ever to alleviate poverty, to make human beings feel that they are living like human beings. And those people suffered for the last 40 years from these problems. And you're talking here about the majority of the population. You're talking about 60 million were under that level. So beginning such an initiative it's going to be like a big star on this government and the president.
Also, the mega projects, the infrastructure projects, how did you see its role in creating jobs, in sustaining the employment level, because this is something that will stay with us for a long, long time. Infrastructure projects, the mega projects, how did you see their role?
I think it's very, very important because in these big projects, you actually do employ contractors. Contractors need cement, need steel, need wood, 83 different jobs and skills in different areas. So you have employed a huge number of companies, and those companies employed a lot of people, enabling them to have employment. We're talking about approximately 4,500 companies working under the mega projects. So this is very important in terms of employment, in terms of allowing those people to have wages, and hence this would lead to purchase of goods and services. And through this, we're talking about companies producing goods and services at a higher level, and accordingly this will pour into the growth of the GDP. So this is very important. So this is how I see it, as a matter of fact.
Right. You're an economic and banking expert. I'm sure that Egyptians' confidence in the solid banking sector, and this confidence has been here for decades, if I may say, in the solid Egyptian banking sector, was also a key factor in getting over the safely via the COVID-19 challenge. Can you elaborate on that?
Okay, sure. Actually, I can say specifically, starting from March, the
2020?
2020, the monetary policy approved to decrease interest rate by 3%, accordingly decreasing the debt service. What is debt service? We're talking here principal interest on all loans, either for corporates, for SMEs, individuals. So this led to a decrease in interest rate, and not only that, it led also, they have taken also the initiative of rescheduling the debt, postponing the debt
Especially
for 6
to
months.
sectors like the tourism sector, the key tourism sector, for instance.
Tourism was a different story, because tourism was facing a big problem. Don't forget that the sector of aviation stopped all over the world. Hence, tourism stopped. So there was a separate initiative for tourism. And there was initiative for industries and for contracting business. So all of these initiatives were put in place in order to enable those sectors to pass by the COVID-19 crisis, which affected all the sectors, a lot of sectors. As a matter of fact, services was one of them. So I think that was from one side. From the financial side, actually the tax department as well, they rescheduled and postponed taxes due during this period of time. So we had both the monetary and fiscal and financial policies departments are working together in order to alleviate the impact of COVID-19 from one side on the companies. Accordingly, all the companies were going or took the initiative not to release any of their employees, because releasing employees requested that the government had to give them wages, which was very difficult to support at the time. From this perspective, those initiatives, either from the monetary policy or fiscal policies, were put together to enable maintenance of employment from one side and to decrease the level of the financial burden on the companies. So that was, and on the individuals, by the way. Credit cards even were postponed payments. So that was a very good initiative. Plus, as I said, the tourism industry, contracting and so on, SMEs.
Right. Now, during Wednesday's events in Sharm el-Sheikh, there was a forum entitled Developmental Experiments in the Face of Poverty. And the president talked to the world's youth attending in the City of Peace in Sharm el-Sheikh about Egypt's experiment here. The president said that Egypt had spent 400 billion US dollars to get out of the danger of poverty and to alleviate poverty. We talked about some of the areas where money was spent, like the mega infrastructure projects, like saving some industries that were falling apart. Could you talk about the infrastructure projects? Could you also tell us about where the Decent Life Initiative? Could you tell us where else did we spend as well to save the economy and alleviate poverty?
Well, I mean, it was 4 areas primarily: health, education, improve income brackets, because actually wages were very low, so that it improved a number of times, and then decent housing, which is a decent life. So it was the 4 objectives put together. We're talking here about 60 million, or around, to be specific, around 60 million people within the poverty level. And those 60 million people suffered from lack of most of the infrastructure needed for a decent life. Hence, we had the initiative, the biggest initiative we talked about, which is decent life. In addition to this, housing, there was 300,000 houses that were built, and the government is aiming to have 1 million housing. Slums, I mean, for me, I think that was a very big accomplishment to see the slums we used to see actually transformed into very decent areas, decent houses. You have also, aside from, and all of this, by the way, helps to maintain employment and to increase employment for all those people who were under poverty level. And we cannot also, when we speak about poverty here, it's not only the poverty, the materialistic poverty we talked about, but it's also lack of strong calibers and very skilled labor. Accordingly, the government put a lot of efforts in order to increase the number of training centers that were developed by the government to train and develop the human being to enable him to work more efficiently in different jobs.
Right.
So I think that was, and they are still working on this area. Hence, I believe
and
that
empowering youth and women. We also saw a lot of empowerment for youth and women during the past years, and surely this is helping the overall economy or the social justice, right?
No, yes, women, empowering women was a great initiative given by starting with the president of the country, and hence it was a fantastic initiative, and there was a lot of financing provided for empowering women. And now we see women in the cabinet, we see women in the people assembly, we see women judges, we see everything. So this is a big development when it comes to women.
There's also a great care, I guess, to developing the skills of young girls to train them to become independent economically in the future.
And actually SMEs as well. We have incubators specifically to enable them to understand the needed principles of a feasibility study, business plan, accounting, and so on and so forth. So that was quite important for SMEs. You have another initiative, which is a microfinance initiative. And this is directed directly through NGOs or specific companies in order to help and provide employment to a woman who is under poverty level, but to give her the opportunity to work and to live a decent life. Not only for females, as a matter of fact, it was directed for females and for men as well at the same time. So you have more than 800 right now NGOs financed through banks. You have a number of companies working on the initiative of microfinance. I'm not speaking about SMEs, very microfinance. Also taking special credit in order to finance the NGOs, and to finance NGOs and to finance, end of the day, the individual and give them the opportunity to have a decent life.
We spoke about the empowerment of women or young girls. Now, I guess this forum, the World Youth Forum, being held in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh, for 4 editions now, that allows the youth, the Egyptian youth, to meet with the world's youth, to discuss with them and to create visions and ideas and to make recommendations. This in itself is a form of youth empowerment, isn't it?
Yes, and I would like to add one more thing. And to see what Egypt, which is not a very rich country in terms of resources like some countries, other countries, was able to do with its resources all of those initiatives. Number one, to provide security for the country. Number two, stable political structures. Number three, economic reform program, and to achieve the best growth rates in terms of GDP, which didn't happen. As a matter of fact, the expected growth rate for Egypt 2022 to reach almost 5.5, which is a very high growth rate, while the whole world is suffering tremendously from debt burden, from COVID implications on the economy, from supply chains, commodity price increases, increase in prices of energy. I mean, it's a lot of problems,
Yeah.
all right? But for them to see what a country has done to alleviate poverty, what a country has spent, which is what you mentioned, $400 billion, equivalent to approximately 6 trillion Egyptian pounds, in order to alleviate poverty. And that Egypt is not going to stand there. Egypt is going to complete its sustainable strategy until they completely close the issue.
Eradicate
poverty completely.
Now, Mrs. Sahar, the president talked about how dangerous poverty is. He said it is the most, it is very dangerous. It is more than a pandemic, and that it destroys the future, not only the present.
Yeah.
So, how important was it? And the president also mentioned how Egypt played the balance between keeping the country open, no lockdown, but during the COVID-19 days, the worst of these days, but at the same time, taking precautionary measures in order to preserve the safety of Egyptian citizens. Talk to us about that balance and how it was struck and how important was it?
Okay. If we're talking about the balance, most of the countries in the world, as you know, they followed a very closed strategy, not an open strategy, whereby what they did, they ordered people to stay in their homes, they closed a lot of factories, they were responsible to give them wages, and in order for them to survive, and accordingly they had to borrow. A level of debt increased significantly for most of the countries in the world, and that was economically, maybe some of the rich countries can sustain to do that, but they sustained it at a cost, at a very high cost when it comes to debt. Egypt didn't do that. Egypt, what they did is priority number one was the health of the population. Hence, they put the proper measures to be taken in order to make sure that the population is receiving proper attention, is taking medication, hospitals are open, they provided more hospitals and more areas to treat the people. They have put more than 100 billion Egyptian pounds in terms of health to be able to cure the pandemic. And in some cases, when closure was imminent, they did it. At the same time, they made sure that business continue. In order to be able for business to continue, there we talked about what the monetary and both the taxes department have done together in order to alleviate the magnitude of debt servicing on companies and individuals, in order to maintain employment, in order to make sure the business is going. So if we are to continue to compare between Egypt GDP and other countries' GDP, the difference was huge, because some countries went down completely to less than 1%, while Egypt, under the worst possible condition, it went to 2.2 and then jumped to 3.6, and now we're talking about prospective 5.5 for Egypt in the coming years. So there was this balance, I think, was the great rationale, logic adopted to save the country, and it did.
Right. And when...
Economically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when combating poverty, the president mentioned during his speech in Sharm el-Sheikh that combating poverty has many sides of the coin. It's not only about economic poverty, but we have to have good education, good health, and good housing. So could you elaborate on that, on the state's efforts and funds like the Tahya Masr Fund and other funds that helped indeed pour money into these areas that the president talked about: housing, education, and health?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Actually, you cannot build a country unless you do three things. One thing, what the government has embarked on is, as I mentioned, proper security, because you cannot have, number two, proper monetary policy. Mm-hmm. Number three, proper financial policy, fiscal policy, and financial policy. Number four, curing public sector companies. Number five, actually when it comes to الدعم اللي هو
endorsement, you mean the social the solidarity?
It's not the social solidarity.
Subsidies. Subsidies.
Curing subsidies in order to decrease the deficit in the budget. So this was very important because for the first time since 40 years, right now you have a strategy by the government that says, I will not sell anything below cost.
Because there was a leakage, there's a clear leakage of those subsidies, and those subsidies for years hadn't gone to those who really deserve them, and some exploit the system to their favor, right?
That was one side.
Yeah.
But the point is the logic, the rationale. If you help somebody, you can sell with the actual cost. But the minute you start decreasing the subsidy to below the cost, somebody has to pay. Who's going to pay? The government. And the government has what we call the sustainable strategy.
Yeah.
To do a sustainable strategy.
This is not sustainable.
This is not sustainable. So this is one thing. Another thing, you need to increase exports.
Yeah.
So how can you do that and reach 100 million in order to decrease the deficit in the balance of trade and other balances as well? That's very important. Number three, how to encourage different sectors in order to grow, to increase their capabilities of growth.
And certainly, I guess, Mrs. Sahar, that increasing exports would need a bigger participation from the part of the private sector, I guess.
It is. It is. As a matter of fact, there is a lot of work done in that issue. For the first time, we've seen exports increase to $25 billion, and that's good. But I think the target is to reach 100 billion, and hence this is going to be a completely different financial for the countries. It's a lot of different initiatives that were taking place at the same time.
Simultaneously.
Simultaneously, so yes, definitely. So this is very important, and all of these steps the government is still working on. In addition to that, when it comes with the economic reform, you did not forget about the low-income brackets people and all those people on the pension. So you made a lot of improvements through initiative like Karama and Forza and others. So this was very important. So this, in that sense, you worked through 3-4 pillars at the same time. And you're still working, and you're still improving, and until you finish with the first.
And there still are a lot of challenges.
of course, the world is different, is changing right now technologically, substantially. So you're trying to adapt digitalization,
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. That
attacking
was
the
my next
cyber
point.
attacks.
Yeah.
All of these issues is completely changed right now.
So how did COVID help us? And it's ironic to say that, but in this regard, in regard to the digitalization of the economy, or speeding up that process that was necessary anyway?
It was very important. As a matter of fact, COVID, you were staying at home, so you needed an instrument to enable you to commute, to enable you to do your work. So most of the people were working from home, online. I'm working from home, my children working from home. So it even moved to the level of the students who never used any kind at all. They started working online. And we're not talking only Egypt, we're talking the whole world. That's one thing. The other thing is that you're talking about digitalization also. And actually, and this is right now implemented in the banking sector. Hence, what you're doing there is that you are providing the banking sector through your mobile. Which is a very good initiative because it has a lot of positive implications in terms of speed, in terms of decreasing the number of people who goes to the bank. So you're decreasing the utilization of gas. And number three, you're decreasing the traffic issues and the problems. You're alleviating the psychology of the human beings that you can sit at home and finalize everything that you need to finalize through your phone. So the world is moving, and we're moving very fast with the world. So digitalization is an issue, I think, that is going to increase more and more across the next few years.
As you mentioned, Mrs. Sahar, at the outset of the program, that climate change was one of the issues that was discussed heavily in Sharm el-Sheikh. And I guess climate change and the future of energy are linked topics. You mentioned energy just right now. So how important is it to move indeed to cleaner energy, to sources of energy that don't harm the environment? And what about Egypt's efforts in this field, in your view?
Well, I'll tell you something. Right now, climate change issue was discussed heavily across the last 3-4 years. Whether we're talking of at United Nations meeting, World Bank, IMF, and so on, and most of the big organizations worldwide. And this is very important for existence of the human being and health and existence, as a matter of fact. So it is not anymore like a simple topic that you can discuss. It's rather a core topic. And there is a lot of money that has to be put in place in order to deal with the climate change problems. When it comes to the green climate or the green energy, I think some of the major industries which leads to a lot of pollutions. Right now, we have the Ministry of Environment, and they do not give license to big companies which can pollute the environment unless they have in place special instruments to prevent pollution. So this is very important, and moving towards more green fields, as you see, expanding in an incredible Tashka and other places, not only actually to decrease your dependence on importation of commodities, but also to encourage more green fields, more agricultural products, and so on. Especially, so this is becoming core.
Yes, especially that, Ms. Sar, and this is something that was discussed also there, that climate change has an effect on water. And there is an issue of water scarcity around the world these days. I mean, water is a basic need for survival. So And as mentioned, it is, you know, we have to preserve the waters for the sake of humanity, for the sake of our existence. So this is also what makes it core, doesn't it? I mean, the effect of climate change on water.
Having water is life.
Yeah.
Aside from development or aside from
Yes.
economic implication, water is life.
Yes.
And I think Egypt is in the middle of a huge struggle in terms to preserve its water. So, and the whole world right now is coming to understand the implication of any scarcity of water on humanity.
Right. The president, Mrs. Sahar, mentioned during his dialogue with the youth and during his speech the fact that poverty, back to the main topic, alleviating poverty, talking about our main subject here in this episode, that poverty was a major reason for infighting, for terrorism, for revolutions, for chaos.
Corruption.
For corruption. So again, you know, as we close out, how important is it, you know, to keep intact, despite all of the challenges, this track to alleviate poverty and to all of this within one sustainable development plan or strategy?
Okay. Actually, on the ground right now, we have a strategy in place. We have resources of around $400 billion already spent. We have a number of initiatives in place when it comes to slums, when it comes to decent life, which will be completed in 3 years' time. So we have this in place. In addition to that, education. Poverty is not only materialistic, as I said, but education. Ensuring that you have proper calibers, but you're not, and you are not poor when it comes to skilled labor. So this is poverty.
And I guess this is a process that is continuous, right?
It is continuous.
It has to be continuous.
Of course.
Improving
of course.
education
Training
levels.
Centers, education, health. All of this together is in a strategy to ensure that in a certain number of years, you've alleviated poverty completely. So this is already on the ground, and we have seen this working on all the dimensions: health, education, housing, income brackets levels, training.
Well, inshallah, God willing, when those beautiful youth come from all around the world to the city of peace, to Sharm el-Sheikh, next year in the years to come, they will see things even better, hopefully in their countries as well, and all around the world. I guess this is a gathering for the sake, indeed, of the future. I mean, for the future, because these youth gathering now, I mean, youth equal the future, right? I mean, it's as simple as that.
I just want to add one thing.
Yes.
What I would like to add here is that to learn from the experience of Egypt and to know that if you want to implement a proper strategy, take the steps and the rest will follow. And this is what Egypt has done.
All right, on that beautiful note, dear viewers, allow us to thank on your behalf our prominent guest here in the studio, Mrs. Sahar Damati, banking and economic expert. It's been a great pleasure having you with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, dear viewers, for watching us. Please stay with Nile TV International.